I did this project for the website I worked for, Open Democracy, last year, where I went along to the Paris climate talks, and I did what I call baddie watch, which was going around following the corporate lobbyists and writing about how they were trying to influence proceedings, which, among many other things, was fascinating because there were, for all of the world, almost no other journalists doing that. Basically, every journalist was focusing on what was happening in the room, despite the fact that anyone who knows anything about politics knows fine well that decisions aren't made in the room, they're made in the lobbies outside the room by in the conversations that happen before meetings. So what I thought I'd do is start off with where I started with this project, which is looking at what is it that the big fossil fuel companies want us to think about them. I think it's always an interesting question. What do they want us to believe? And it's kind of easy because they wrote it all down for us. They released a statement. The 10 of the biggest global oil and gas companies put out a statement before the Paris climate talks last year, in which they called for effective climate change agreement of COP21. They called on governments to strengthen actions and investments to contribute to reducing the greenhouse gas intensity of the global energy mix, support the implementation of clear, stable policy frameworks consistent with the 2°C future. These will help our companies to take informed decisions and make effective and sustainable contributions to addressing climate change, collaborate in a number of areas such as efficiency, natural gas, research and development, and carbon capture and storage. And what you'll find is that natural gas and carbon capture and storage are the two things that they talk about all the time. Natural gas, carbon capture and storage, natural gas, carbon capture and storage. They tell you that endlessly. That's their core message. They're naturally messaging, pick two messages, repeat them, so all the journalists in the room believe that's what they care about. Report regularly and consistently, and so on. They want us to believe that they're the good guys, they care, this is Shell, this is BP, Exxon didn't sign that statement, but the rest of them did. What's the problem with that, particularly that they're saying this for a 2°C carbon future, temperature future? What's the obvious question you would ask them if you were a journalist about that? Anyone?
Does the technology work?
Does the technology work? For me, there's an even more difficult question for them.
Is it compatible with climate?
Is it economically viable?
Sorry, what were you saying?
You're still putting carbon in the atmosphere.
You're still putting carbon in the atmosphere. So specifically, the question that I did put to them when they had their event at the climate conference, because they do, all the oil companies, they have huge rooms in the conference centre where they invite people and they give you lots of nice glasses of wine and yummy things, and you can sit around all day and use their free Wi-Fi and so on, which is very useful if you're sitting listening to what they're saying. What I did say to them is, so if you believe that we're going to, that we should keep our global temperature warming below 2 degrees, and scientists agree that even just in your oil reserves, you've got enough carbon to go 5 times past that target, aren't you saying to your shareholders that you're totally insolvent, that you can't possibly survive as companies because your entire wealth as a company is based on an asset which you're saying has to stay on the ground? So I went along to this event, I asked them this question, and they all sort of, in the room, they flapped around it. People are remarkably bad, they're not politicians, at answering questions they don't want to answer, but none of them quite did answer. And then I spoke to the head of Shell afterwards, head of Shell's climate change team afterwards, who was chairing this event, and he kind of was quite apologetic, and he came up to me, not really thinking about the fact that obviously the recorder was still on, and said, well, the thing is that obviously, and I paraphrase, but obviously we just don't believe in the 2°C target. I mean, that's the only answer to your question. I can't say that, but clearly the truth is that it's nonsense. You're quite right that we'd be insolvent if we went for the actual target, and we just don't believe it's going to happen. And so for me, the reason I start with that story is that what's amazing is when you get these guys thinking they're behind closed doors and they're terrible journalists. I mean, we never said we were off the record, so we say much about that. But when you get these guys behind even vaguely closed doors, they're immediately honest about the fact that what they say in public is just lying. They do not believe in the 2°C target. They don't believe anything that they said in the Paris climate deal is going to be stuck to, and they're probably right about that. Not to be too depressing about it. I mean, the other thing. Okay, hello. How are you guys doing? Come in. Lots of people, a whole string of people. The other extraordinary event that I found at that conference was so Marcel Proust. People familiar with Proust? So there's this club in central Paris, this gentleman's club, which is called the Club Jockey. Marcel Proust described it as the inner sanctum of the elite. And there was this event there which I found out about, and so went along to, because the thing about very exclusive clubs is that their members don't like being frisked or asked for ID, so as long as you wear a nice suit, you can just walk in the front door. I went along, and I'll describe who the hosts were in a moment, but just to give a sense of what kind of the conference is like behind the scenes, it's this incredibly plush, the nicest room you've ever been in, wonderful wine, very, very nice wine. We walked in the door, within 5 minutes I'm shaking Al Gore's hand, hello Mr. Gore, nice to meet you. Go around the corner and there is the lawyer in Florida who in 2000, for those of you who remember, made sure that Al Gore's ballots weren't counted if they had hanging chads in the same room as Al Gore, who he's screwed over 8 years earlier, whatever it was, 15 years earlier. And now is the chief lobbyist for the aviation industry. They all get up and they all give all these speeches, including Al Gore himself, about how important it is that we meet our climate targets. They give, you're almost in tears at the passion of their words, at how much they care about this problem. They'll talk about children in Africa and how climate change is destroying their lives. They'll talk about, how it's absolutely vital we bring politicians together, and this was the event for American politicians in Paris. We bring politicians together in order to act on this issue. What they don't tell you is that they, the hosts of this event, the Edison Electric Institute, are the primary lobbying body for publicly listed electricity companies in the States, and as such they're the main industry lobby group which is working to stop any of Obama's action on climate change, which is funding massive climate change denial throughout the US media, and doing everything they can at the centre of global power to stop action on climate change. And so again, I suppose, that gives me reason to feel sceptical about what people are saying, because what they say behind closed doors, and you can literally walk through the closed doors if you know which ones they are and listen to them, is exactly the opposite of what they say in public. I mean, Al Gore, I'm certain, does care about this stuff, but even he, because these people are so powerful, can be made to come and perform like a monkey for them and tell lots of funny stories about how he gets mistaken, how people approach him in the street now and say, oh, then I never told you, like a much older version of Al Gore. But he has to go and perform like a monkey for them and tell his kind of crap jokes. Because they're so powerful and they're able to drag even Al Gore, who I think does care about this, into their meetings so they can attract other lobbyists and so on. And so those aren't, for me, what I was asked to talk about was why Paris won't save us. Those aren't hard bits of evidence as such. I haven't gone to talk about what's in the deal yet. But what that does indicate to me is that there's not much reason to believe a lot of the spinneries, because you get people who are very happy to stand on stage and talk at length about how much they care about these issues, and then as soon as you talk to them behind closed doors, they admit that's all just literally their PR. They're happy to say to journalists that they're basically lying when you ask them a difficult question. And so what does the deal say? I've got a friend, a guy called George Marshall, who I was showing around the conference centre. The conference centre itself, by the way, slight aside, is this extraordinary place. It's old airport hangar. And every country, it's kind of all just plywood. It's amazingly kind of, like shoddy. All these little plywood rooms with a kind of bit of blue tacked on paper for each country. And then all these kind of organisations with nice kind of greeny names, which when you do a bit of Googling for a while, turn out to be different lobby groups for different bits of the fossil fuel industry. But they all, they're talking about how much they, the International Emissions Trading Association is just Chevron, Exxon, and all the different, main oil companies. But as I was showing this friend around the conference centre, who'd just come over for a day or two, what he pointed out to me, which is perhaps the most extraordinary thing about this whole process, which is that at no point in any of these negotiations does anyone mention the most important thing about climate change, which is the very simple bit of the geological process, which is keeping hydrocarbons in the ground. They don't talk about the process of extraction. The whole setup is all talking about the end use of carbon. So it's talking about whether you're going to tax carbon or trade carbon, both of which are utterly useless if you already have within your system of carbon you're extracting at the moment 5 times as much carbon as we can put into the atmosphere. But no one ever mentioned it. It's like, as George put it, it's like trying to have a conference on drug use internationally and never once mentioning drug dealers, because the drug dealers are the main sponsors of the conference, as is the case in the Paris climate talks. The first thing you see when you walk into the talks is a large board listing all the corporate sponsors, which includes most major oil companies. It includes, in Paris, of course, EDF, who have filthy coal power stations all across Europe. And so, surprise, surprise, the climate talks aren't likely to be hugely effective. So that's all quite negative. But the other thing I'd say is that I don't think it is entirely negative, not because of the content of the treaty, which was better than expected in some ways, in that it did talk about the need for a 1.5 degree future. It didn't talk about how we're going to get there, but it did mention that. And if we go above 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees, what we're talking about is writing off most of Africa. And that's at Copenhagen 2009, what the African delegates pointed out. So the fact that's at least referred to is a positive thing. But more importantly, what gave me hope is that all of these, or maybe not the Americans so much, but almost all of the fossil fuel executives seemed totally miserable. The rest of us were having fun, but these guys knew they were the bad guys. This is why they confess to you. It's like you're the counsellor. The trick of journalism with people like that is just to nod sympathetically and listen. And they start to almost cry on your shoulder and admit everything they're doing is wrong. And there's a very strong sense that they know that they're yesterday's people. They know that they don't know how it's going to happen, but they know that the world that they've dedicated their lives to building is falling apart around them. They know that in practice they can't get away with burning all of those fossil fuels under the ground. They know that they can't get away with totally plundering the climatic system. They don't know how it's going to change, but they can tell, and they admit that to you. They can tell that actually the world that they're relying on for their share prices to remain at the level they're at is not one which is stable. It's one that's changing very fast politically, and that ultimately that political change is going to bring down the companies that they rely on, that they work spend their time defending. And so I was asked to talk about why Paris won't save us, and yeah, sure, Paris won't save us. We'll save ourselves. But I did feel quite hopeful when I left, not because of the words in the treaty, as I said, or what people were saying on TV screens, because I got a very strong sense that social movements, which, I remember marching in Glen Eagles in 2005 with the G8, and it felt very ephemeral. I remember going to Copenhagen to march outside the conference, and even then with Obama arriving, we all felt sort of irrelevant. And in 2015, it felt like the social movements and the people involved in them, even though after the Paris attacks there wasn't the same together marching, it felt like the power there was much greater than I'd seen before. The sense that we own the future now, this is our future and we're going to shape it and we're not going to let it get in the way, was stronger than I'd ever seen before. And so that left me going home for Christmas after the conference feeling really quite positive. And so that's what I'll end on. Thanks.